a lot of people have been wanting to really get into the insight, the real knowledge on, the truth about crystals. We see this everywhere. This is something that a lot of you who have spiritual family members have seen. The collection of crystals and rocks and amethysts, what have you, is something that we've seen from people, centuries, for a long time. A lot of you have a lot of amethysts, a lot of crystals and rocks in your homes. I have a lot as well. And a lot of people want to know what is the truth about them. What crystals to buy, what rocks to purchase. What is the whole purpose of that? Is there any real validity to what people say about crystals? Do they have any healing powers? Do they do anything? What is the science behind them? What is it? A lot of people just really get into crystals for how they look. A lot of people read a lot of books and do a lot of research on crystals to try to really understand the purpose for them, how to activate the chakras using the crystals, and what crystals are the best to use, where to get them from, so on and so forth. But, it's a big misconception about crystals. And a lot of people are not going to really understand, the true use for them. And it's almost in the same realm as, they hate to put them in that same category, but marijuana. As I said before, a lot of people use marijuana and they waste it. Marijuana use really is for the purpose of meditation, plain and simple. It's to get you to that place. It's what you're supposed to use it for. So you're wasting an altered state of consciousness to help you really develop spiritually if you're just sitting around getting high. You're just smoking weed for recreational use. You're feeling you're feeling that yoke. You're feeling that energy breach. You're feeling that, that altered state of consciousness. For what? For nothing. You're not absorbing anything. You're not putting out any type of, energy, or, trying to connect consciously with anything to bring any, use, to the marijuana. So if you're smoking weed, you want to use it for meditative purposes to really get you into that altered state. And if you can maintain and control meditation within that state, you can have real benefits with marijuana. And this is what the ancients used it for, Indians as well. So crystals is basically the same. We're going to get to at the end of the video how to properly use them. But first, of course, there's understanding that must be had. And there's a lot of stuff people got to understand. But first of all is the official, explanation from science, the official thing that they tell us about crystals. And this is basically what they say. Now, it says here, is there any science behind crystal healing? Now, don't shoot the messenger. It says there is no peer-reviewed scientific evidence that crystal healing has any effect. It is considered a pseudoscience. Alleged successes of crystal healing can be attributed to the placebo effect. And the placebo effect is, of course, they had a whole test where, if you don't know already, they give you a pill that does nothing and a pill that does something, and tell you that the pill that does nothing is absolutely great, and you basically heal yourself based upon that knowledge. But really, it's nothing. It's all you. The scientific evidence suggests that no, crystals do not have any mystic powers or attributes that can aid in physical, mental, or spiritual healing or well-being. According to science, crystals do not have any healing or restorative powers over the mind, body, or soul, but belief can certainly be a powerful thing. So now, one of the things you got to think about, and, by the way, we're going to bust all that up that I just read. It's bogus. We're going to bust that up. But one of the things you got to think about, one, is crystals. It's crystals. You got to think about it. If crystals had this power, if they can heal and restore and everything that it's talking about, they would cost a lot more money. A lot of people probably wouldn't even sell them. They probably keep them themselves, or they'd be super expensive if you do sell them. But we don't see this. A lot of you have crystals in your house. A lot of people absolutely have no clue. Now, understand this is by design. When you read articles like that from Google to kind of sort of put people off, it lowers the price of crystals unless you get a huge amethyst or something like that, or something of a more rare quality like a diamond or ruby or what have you. Those ones cost money. But regular crystals, which we'll get into the composition, cheap for the most part. But they understand, and I understand, One, they know you're not going to ever figure out the purpose of crystals and everything that's behind it that we're going to go through in this video. They know you're not going to do that. A lot of people, even if you did research on crystals, there's a lot of books out there, a lot of people talking about it. They know the deeper meaning and what you have to go into to really get people to understand what that's about and why for so long so many civilizations, even still to this day, use them. People swear by them, and they are in so many facets of healing and spiritual practices, throughout the planet. And it's a reason for this, and it's a very real reason that they do work. And if you know how to activate and use them, you can get the benefits of them, which we're going to discuss in this video. But to understand, you're not going to understand that, and it's going to be hard to grasp for a lot of people. So to make sure the price is low, because people are like, oh, they cheap, so they must don't work. And it's put in that whole realm of pseudoscience, as I said, placebo effect, as we read. And people typically discount them as, well, they just pretty rocks. I like them because they're pretty, so I'm going to buy them. But what's the truth? What is this all about? What is the truth about it? This is what we're going to get into. So now, despite what the article is talking about, you got to understand this. Crystals are made of elements, plain and simple, elements. So you have to think about that, elements. Now, this is the part that's going to be tough for people to understand, because a lot of people read stuff and just accept it when it kind of sort of makes sense. But you got to really start thinking about stuff in terms of you, in terms of matter, material, energy, and what have you. So now you have crystals is made of two of the most abundant elements, which is silicon and oxygen. Plain and simple. Now, as I talked about before, understanding one, consciousness creates energy. Energy gives us these atoms. Certain amounts of atoms gives us elements. These elements create the physical, world that we know today, physical universe, including us. So you have silicon and oxygen makes crystals, but silicon and oxygen just so happen to be two of the most essential elements in the creation of us. Plain and simple, the creation of life. So silicon and oxygen as a compound makes up 59% of the Earth's crust. Think about that. This is an abundant element that we're talking about. It's everywhere. So you got to put that into perspective and understand, one, we're talking about something that is in you. So that's one thing, when they're talking about snow effect and everything like that, you got to think about stuff like that. But that's a compound. That means together. We're talking about, two of the most abundant elements that exist. So now, as I said, you have silicon, oxygen can be found in the body. Now, whenever silicon is dealing with the body, they refer to it as silica, which is basically a silicon dioxide. Now, silica basically deals with the corrective tissue of the skin. It deals with anything. Anytime your skin needs to be repaired or if it's damaged, silica helps with that. It basically helps with any collagen-based part of the skin, hair, toenails, skin, what have you. And collagen basically makes up your corrective tissue, of the skin. So silica deals with this. Now, silica responsible for strong bones and a lot of stuff dealing with your skin. It's something that's working for you basically every day. Now, it says here, the role of silica in your body. Humans use silica as a food additive and a filter in drugs and vitamins. It has a low bioavailability, meaning your body will only absorb a tiny amount of silica and excrete the rest in urine. Most of the silica in your body is in a form called orthosilicic acid. It exists in your bones, tendons, aorta, liver, and kidneys. You'll find silica in a lot of places: food, rocks, plants, medicine, cosmetics, toothpaste, and those little dry gel packs that are packed in with your product packaging to absorb moisture. We know what those are. There's even silica in your body, as I just said. The most common form of silica is quartz, a component of stone, concrete, and sand. Simply put, silica is everywhere. If you've touched a rock or been to the beach, you've handled silica. Don't worry, it's mostly harmless and can even be beneficial. So now it says, the most common form of silica is quartz, which quartz is a rock, crystal, however you want to say it. But again, remember, silica is in the body. So you got to understand, as I said before, you have consciousness creating energy, energy creating these atoms, atoms giving us elements. Different amounts of these atoms will give us different elements. So as I said before, 20 hydrogen atoms to give you calcium. Calcium makes up our bones and teeth. And 14 hydrogen atoms to give you crystals. Now, 14 hydrogen atoms basically bonded under pressure. It's a lot of pressure. Bonded under pressure basically form into these three-dimensional repeating patterns that basically gives crystals its shape. So you have, crystals in the body. And it's something to really think about, crystals in the body. If you ever heard of vertigo, then you understand about crystals being in the body. Now it says here, experts who treat dizziness estimate that about 20% of all dizziness is due to loose crystals or air rocks in the inner ear. The condition known as benign paroxysmal positional vertigo, or BPPV, is usually treated with a series of simple head movements aimed at putting the dislodged ear rocks back where they came from so they can be cleared away by the immune system. BPPV can be triggered by head injury. People get punched in the head to get dizzy. Injury or virus. The condition is more common in older adults. Tiny air rocks keep us balanced. Within the inner ear, there's a little pouch called the utricle that contains about 1,000 little pebbles made of calcium carbonate. The tiny rocks serve an important purpose. They stimulate nerve cells when we move our head and send signals to our brain that guide our sense from up and down. The trouble is that sometimes the little rocks fall off, explains Dr. Timothy Hain, a dizziness expert at Northwestern University. When the rocks fall into one of the inner ear canals, the brain gets confused. As the rocks roll around in the canal, the brain senses that the head is moving a lot more than it actually is. The result, vertigo. Now, it's hard for a lot of people to believe that you can actually have rocks and crystals formulating within your body. We're talking about stones, stuff that you find on Earth and supposedly in outer space. You have to make that connection. It's essential to understanding this whole point about crystals. Think about that. Stones being produced within the body. And it's not just vertigo. You have salivary gland stones. Now, salivary gland stones is basically when chemicals in your saliva basically seep. Too many of these chemicals seep into glands into your mouth and they overwhelm that gland and these stones are produced. It's a horrible sight. You don't want to look it up. But you get these stones, being produced within the mouth. You also have, of course, kidney stones. And kidney stones, a lot of people always ask that question, is a real stone. We're talking about real stones being produced. And these stones is made of freaking calcium, calcium oxalate, phosphate, uric acid, and other elements that's produced in your body. Now, a lot of people seen these kidney stones when they pop them out. It'd be these rocks, and it's real rocks. It's crazy. They don't really know the cause of kidney stones, but they think it's due to having a diet of too many, they say rock producing foods, beets, nuts, spinach, rhubarb, tea, stuff like that, believe it or not. But you have these things that can produce rocks within the body. Another one is gout. It says here, I'm going to just read right here. It says, gout arthritis is caused by the deposition of crystals of uric acid in the joint. You look there at the picture, you see these little crystals. And I'm just talking about uric acid being one of the components, the elements basically found in these kidney stones. So it's a lot of things that we can see where you have the production of rocks, crystals, formulating within the human body itself. So now, as I said, you have quartz. Quartz being one of the most common forms of silica, crystalline silica to be exact. Now, you have silicon and oxygen, which is a great conductor of electricity. Quartz is one of the best conductors of electricity, which is why you find quartz in, microchips. You find them in many microchips. You find them in any kind of phone, computers, TVs, any kind of smartphone, any kind of major electronic devices. You're going to find quartz. It's just that simple. And the reason why quartz is used because not only is a great conductor of electricity, it has a property basically called piezoelectricity. Now, piezoelectricity is a property that basically is when you have the pressure, mechanical pressure that converts into electricity. So the mechanical part being basically the pressure of, a liquid, a gas, or a fluid that's being converted into electricity. Now it says here, when a quartz crystal is cut or struck together, the pressure applied to it generates an electrical charge. When an electrical charge is applied to the quartz, the crystal distorts And as the voltage is removed, the crystal creates an electrical field. It vibrates sometimes 30,000 times per second. Considering our bodies are constantly producing electrical signals, the interaction between us and crystals is pretty clear. And we're going to come back to this because what I just read is really important. Now, I'm going to be basically going through a few articles on a few sources so you can see and understand. One, because we got to refute the first thing I read about, crystals having absolutely no effect on people, so on and so forth. You have to really, when you go into it, it doesn't make any sense. When we're talking about, as I said, the body producing these crystals, and there has to be this connection where you understand. But it's more to it as we're going to get into. But it doesn't fit, that you have these crystals everywhere. They are all over the world. They are abundant. They make up a large part of the earth itself, and we produce them. Think about that. So you got to look at that fact. You got to look at the fact that, one, we take for granted a lot of stuff. And that's one of the things I said. You really have to stop taking for granted a lot of stuff that's given to us. I look at cell phones still to this day, and they blow my mind. I mean, they just blow my mind, like what they can do. This little thing can do so much, yet it could not work without these quartz crystals, without these crystals and little rocks that you don't even know the name of. But it's a lot of components in there that we take for granted that is essential to our phones and TVs and everything working. We understand about memory cards can store a shitload of memory on a memory card, and it's like, how? I mean, it's data, large amounts of data. It's because of crystals. Now it says here, and I'm going to read a lot of articles because you got to, as I said, you got to really have a comparison to what I just read, because the first thing people are going to say when you pull up the article, or when you, make any kind of reference to crystals working, they're going to pull up that article because it's been there. And I had people do this, and I'm had to go through a lengthy conversation and break it down to them why that don't make sense. You understand what I'm doing right here? But I want to give you guys and read to you guys a lot of different things so you can know where to draw from besides this video to basically get information when you're talking about crystals and how they work. A lot of people are just not going to have this information or even know where to go to look. But it's a lot of things you got to think about as towards the power of crystals, as we're talking about, as we can see with our phones and TVs and everything else. Now, if we are energetic beings, you got to make that connection, which I'm going to make at the end. But it says here, Superman crystals could store 360 terabytes of data forever. Now, we'll get into this in a second. Now, researchers have been able to demonstrate the ability to read and write data using a 5-dimensional recording process in a synthetic crystal to store massive amounts of data indefinitely. The researchers led by Jingayu Zhang from the University of Southampton in the UK successfully recorded a 300 kilobyte data copy of a text file onto nanostructured glass in 5D using ultra-fast and intense pulse laser. The file was written in 3 layers of nanostructured dots separated by 5 micrometers, which is crazy micrometers, which is 5 millionths of a meter. The scientists used a femtosecond laser, which emits pulses of light in femtoseconds. That's 1 quadrillionth or 1 millionth of a billionth of a second. It's crazy. The 5D read-write laser can record up to an estimate of 360 terabyte data disk capacity on nanostructured glass, capable of thermal stability up to 1000 degrees Celsius, and a practically unlimited lifetime. So now it's a big deal of understanding how we can store massive amounts of information in crystals. We know they model computers off the human brain, but understanding how you can store this data in crystals is something that they understood by understanding DNA. We have DNA crystals. We understand DNA contains so much information that make up us. Plain and simple, massive amounts of information. Crystal form. Crystals, DNA crystals is a big thing that they have, so many different fields dedicated to this fact. So it says here, scientists achieved the first stable, and I don't like this, simulations of DNA crystals, which is crazy. I'm just going to read this part here. It says, since the birth of structural biology, X-ray crystallography has been the most widely used technique to determine the 3-dimensional structure of biomolecules. The chemical compounds found in living organisms. In this regard, knowledge of the interactions between the biomolecules with their crystal environment and the molecular forces that stabilize the crystals would serve to optimize this technique. Now, understand if they are simulating or creating some kind of synthetic crystalline DNA, crystal DNA. I mean, they are basically fabricating the structure for the creation of the human body. It's cloning, basically. It's amazing. But if you're doing that, we're talking about not just cloning, but creating somebody with that DNA pattern, with that information. Basically, since, your DNA is containing all information from your past and from the makeup of life, which is another thing that, not to jump off track, but you got to think about that. How the hell, and this is how you got to really look at stuff sometimes. One, we're passing down information. The fact that your child learns how to walk, that's DNA information passed down. The fact that your child knows how to talk later on and everything that it learns how to do is passed down through DNA. It's programming passed down. The crazy part about the past life being wiped, what is that? What is that process that everything is wiped except for the basic components for the operating system. So you got to look at it in terms of a computer system. If you go ahead and factory reset your computer, everything is going to be gone unless you click that option and keep everything. But everything is going to be gone. What's going to be left is the OS and the stuff that came with the OS to run a computer. But all that data and pictures and all that stuff, gone, plain and simple. So you got to think about that with DNA and passing down that information. And we pass it down. It's just the basic building blocks for us, and we keep the stuff about, walking and talking and everything like that. The knowledge we don't. And that shows you that there's this connection, a separate connection from just DNA and, and consciousness. It's different. Consciousness is it's what you take with you. This, DNA and walking and talking and mechanics of the body, it's a different program. And this whole crystalline and understand this whole crystalline structure of the DNA, how information is passed down, kind of shows you that if you understand what I'm saying. But the fact that they can simulate that is deep. It's crazy that they can basically go ahead and take the information needed to go ahead and build the body. And with that, it's still traits. It's still in there, still locked in there. So you can sing because your mama sang, or you can draw because your daddy drew, or you can play ball because your dad did. And those little traits is still within there as well. You don't lose everything. There's some little pieces that you keep. Features. You look like your mama. Got the same kind of nose, stuff like that. Those type of features, traits, all that stuff is still within there. You get a little teeny, it's filtered down, it's a little teeny bit when you had that child and they come back and they have these features. All that stored within the DNA. It's crystalline, it's crystals, crystalline DNA, same structure, the same thing we're talking about, holding massive amounts of data within crystals, within you. Make that connection, because we got to understand, the body holds that memory. It holds it. So the growth of muscles, tendons and so on and so forth, how something is going to grow, where it's going to grow out to. I mean, we don't even think about the measurements itself. That's the whole makeup of the body. You're going to grow this tall, this length, so on and so forth. This is all information. It's all stuff. It's like a computer program. It's like codes. All that stuff is information. It's all within you. It's within your skin, your genes, your DNA. It's all there. It's time sensitive like a mug. During this time, or when the body receives a certain amount of this activates. It's like programs, so on and so forth. Massive amounts of information in the body. It's the same when we think about crystals. It's really no different. And we got to look at it like that. So when we're talking about, being able to program minds and bodies and so on and so forth, and being able to induce certain chemicals to make stuff stop hurting, to numb stuff that we see doctors do all the time. It's a lot of stuff that can be done to show you how the body is similar to computers, and how we have this information field within our body, this information DNA within us that can be tampered with and changed, and them making some kind of synthetic form of the crystalline structure of a DNA, which, if you ever seen it before, looks like a kaleidoscope. It's actually beautiful, and it's something amazing. But we got to look at that and think about that in the same type of context as crystals, our body, and the connection that we should have. Forget what the article was talking about. This is a connection that should exist, since we talk about stuff that exists within us. So the Earth's crust that we walk on is basically made up of crystals and rocks with electrical producing properties. So if you ever heard of people say you have to ground this wire, people doing work on a house, doing construction, they're talking about, you have to ground the wire. Now, if you go into a house and you see a lot of the sockets look like this, then that means that house probably has fuse boxes instead of a circuit breaker. So when you see that little hole at the bottom that looks like this here, that hole means there's a grounded wire. It's for grounded wires. That's giving the circuit something to pass through, which is basically the ground. So you probably seen a model before. It's like you're working on a house, and let's say the wire that's here somehow comes detached and it's touching the metal part of this socket here. If somebody comes along and begins to do work on this socket and they touch it, they're going to get electrocuted if there is no ground wire. You know what I'm saying? You understand? So there's no way for the signal to be relayed to the circuit breaker or the fuse box to cut off so the person doesn't get electrocuted. Circuit breaker only, because the fuse box, mostly they don't do that. They have to take fuses. So basically, if somebody comes now with the wire being exposed and touching the metal base of this, they come and touch it, they're going to get electrocuted. So by having a ground wire, what happens is once the circuit is not complete, or if you go and you plug in like an old broke TV or any type of electrical equipment that don't work, you plug it in, it's going to blow the circuit breaker, because the signal is going to be sent to the box to shut the box off. Now, if that signal is no ground wire there, no signal will be sent. So the live wire that's exposed, basically, if anybody touch it, they're going to get electrocuted. And this is how you have fires happen, inside the walls and stuff like that, because there's nothing there to cut the circuit, to cut the flow of electricity flowing through. Like if you plug something in that's bad into the wall, or while something is plugged in, it shorts out, and then now you have this continuous circuit, keep going, not shutting off the breaker. It's keep flowing through the walls, and eventually something's going to catch on fire. You're going to have electrical fire within the walls, house will burn down. By having it grounded, the signal is basically sent back to the box to shut off and cut off all power. And when that happens, you go to the breaker. If the breaker don't work, so it's something within the walls, and you can fix that. So it's important to have that ground wire. So they got to think about it. The earth is made and ready for energy to flow through it. Think about that. We all walking on this earth. You have energy flowing through it. It's made for energy to flow through it. And if you think if we had control over our energy and how everything is connected to the earth in some way, shape, or form, and we're walking, we're touching the ground, there is this connection. It's one of the reasons why a lot of these hippies, a lot of these earthers talk about, walking around with your shoes off in the grass and everything like that, being connected to the earth. It's a lot of stuff that sounds real crazy and spooky when you talk about crystals having powers and so on and so forth. People talking about barefoot in the grass. A lot of people won't get it. They won't understand it and make that connection, because it requires a lot of information. But it's truth to it. But if you think about if you can control that energy, how we could communicate differently with each other, with animals, with trees, with so on and so forth, by having this energy connection with the earth itself, and understanding as well, you have energy just out there. When we talk about Tesla and wireless energy and everything like that, it's out there. The earth, the atmosphere, everything, this whole system we live in is set and ready for our energy to be connected to it. So when we're talking about this connection that we're supposed to have, we've lost that connection. It's basically gone. It's a connection that we once had. It's the connection that the ancient Egyptians was talking about getting back. And just thinking about being locked in and tapped in to being connected to everything, to all of a sudden, you're out. And you're like, woo, trying to figure out what the hell happened and get this connection back and understand, how you was tapped into this energy flow that seems to be put here and was, available to us, but we lost the knowledge of how to really tap into it.